Hello to everyone in the Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Cathedral community and all of our friends. This is Father Jonathan. I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to continue our reflection on the sixth Beatitude, Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Now we've talked about how to be pure of heart is to orient ourselves completely in the totality of our being, or from the core of our being, towards our God. It's about putting God first. And this is because God is not some outlier or something that is among many things that we devote ourselves to, but God is the core of our life. He's the center of our very life and existence. And we are called to seek God first, and his righteousness, as it says. And we've talked a little bit about righteousness before. Now, this reaffirms the first and most important fact of our lives as Christian, that to be ourselves, to really be ourselves authentically, is to be oriented completely and utterly towards our God. And that's the ultimate goal of our existence, to be not just oriented towards, but ultimately come into union with our God. And we talked about that. But it takes a little bit of effort on our part. Though the gift is freely given to us, we have to actualize that gift in our lives. We can set up our own roadblocks to God's grace and mercy by the way that we choose to live our lives. And so we're called to be, yes, theocentric, but it means that we're also called to peel away those things that divide our attention from God. And what are those things? Well, if God is our Father and gives us life and existence, and our true being is with him, well, anytime we put something between ourselves and him, we're putting something between ourselves and our true and authentic being, if that makes sense. If God is the source of all life and holiness, well, then we must be devoted to our God and put nothing else before him. Which means that we have to be freed from our attachments to this world. It doesn't mean that we aren't connected to this world. It doesn't mean that we go through life aloof and unconnected, not relating to others, not relating to the things that we have to do. That's very much a part of it. But there's a difference between relating to it appropriately, relating to other people appropriately, relating to things, objects appropriately, and being attached so that they become that which dictates our lives, instead of God, who, again, we have already said, is the very core, the very center, and the ultimate aim of our life. And part of this is understanding that we can't set up for ourselves false gods. Now, throughout the Old Testament, we hear about idolatry, and idolatry might not be something that we immediately think of in living in this world, because we don't necessarily have carved images, graven images of deities other than our God. We don't do that. We don't worship idols, right? Well, when we really think about it, when we look at our lives and what we devote ourselves to, how often perhaps do we find ourselves devoted to things that are not our God? Be it money and wealth and power, authority, these things become idols for us. It was said once by a priest that I'm familiar with that there, in biblical language, as far as we understand the biblical use of the word idolatry, and as far as we understand as Christians the word atheist, there's no one who is truly an atheist, because we all have our gods, we all have our idols, we all have those things that distract our attention from the one thing needful, our relationship with God. And so this idolatry that we're talking about that prevents our hearts from being pure is the connection I'm trying to make. Doesn't just mean worshiping strange gods, but also not turning our attention away from God. We're called to not be idolatrous in our turning of our attention away from God. Putting God first in all things. In fact, doing everything we do from the place of our relationship with God. We do not live apart from our circumstances, of course, as I've already indicated, which means that we have to live our lives as we are, where we are, in the circumstances where we find ourselves. But as Christians, we're called not to compartmentalize our lives, to say, this is my religious time and this is the rest of my time. But to understand that all of our circumstances allow space for us to orient towards what is ultimately important, our relationship with God. And in fact, we live ourselves authentically in the midst of our circumstances when we are doing so in relation to God. And for these reasons, our love for God doesn't become separated from the ins and outs of our daily lived experience. In fact, we offer up our lived experience as a type of sacrifice to God. A life well lived is the sacrifice acceptable to God. Now, we're not called in this regard to diminish the importance of loving relationships with others, for instance. We don't stop having deep and meaningful connection to our fellow human beings, our friends, our family. Those are important because they are also part of who we are, because we're not isolated individuals, but we're persons living in communities. This is just a shifting of focus and attention away from that which doesn't last to that which does. And allowing our relationship with what is ultimate and eternal, namely our God, to infuse our other relationships with meaning, significance, and ultimately permanence. So we are responsible for our relationships and what is required of us because of those relationships, our responsibilities. Part of living authentically in relationship with God is being accountable for the relationships we have and the responsibilities that we have because of them. We don't neglect them. And therefore, in doing the things that we do in our daily lives, working, caring for our families, participating in the ins and outs of this economic system we find ourselves in, all of these become avenues for us to manifest our relationship with God in a world that needs God's presence. So, putting God first does not mean that we skirt our responsibilities. It means that we reinterpret our responsibilities through the lens of our relationship with God. In the next video, we'll talk more about what this means and how we might think about it daily to accomplish our ultimate goal, union with God, and our more immediate purpose, to cultivate virtue, and to do what this Beatitude tells us to do, which is to see God through the purity of our hearts. God bless you. We're here for you. We love you. Don't hesitate to reach out. Call us, email us, send us a message on social media, leave a note in the comment section. Let us know that you're here and let us know what you need. God bless you and have a beautiful rest of your day.